China is standing firm on its new air defense identification zone for the East China Sea. Announced on Saturday, the zone contains islands known as the Diaoyu to China and the Senkaku to Japan, claimed by both countries. Beijing's decision to impose an air defense identification zone in the region will mean Japanese aircraft flying over the disputed islands will now have to obey Chinese rules or be subject to what China calls defensive emergency measures.
The Chinese government is establishing the East China Sea Air Defense Identification Zone in accordance with the United Nations Charter and other international law and practices. The purpose is to safeguard China's sovereignty and territorial and airspace safety.
America has a treaty with Japan to defend territories under Japanese administration, including the islands. U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel immediately condemned China's plan as a destabilizing attempt to alter the regional status quo. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has also called China's plan very dangerous and demanded it be scrapped. In the 1970s, China and Japan came to an agreement to acknowledge their conflicting claims to the islands and shelve the dispute for future generations to solve. China says the Japanese government ended that agreement last year when it bought 3 of the islands from private ownership. Chinese experts say their country only refrained from imposing an air defense zone out of respect for the agreement, and that Hagel's remarks show hypocrisy.
Whether in the East China Sea or any of our marine territory, as with any neighbor with whom it has overlapping air defense zones, Japan will have to negotiate.
Which a Chinese warship tried to force a U.S. guided missile cruiser to stop in international waters was likely staged by the Chinese. He believes the United States' response was, in fact, appropriate.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the Chinese are out there in the South China Sea, conducted naval maneuvers. You know, they've acquired some new ships. They're out there with their aircraft carrier that they've got from Russia. And the fact of the matter is, we normally would surveil something like that, as they would do on our naval operations. And I'm suspecting strongly that's what our ship was doing in international waters. We have the right to observe them. They clearly, this is all about power and control, Lou. They really want to regain control and influence.
As one of its warships operating in international waters in the South China Sea has avoided a collision with a Chinese naval vessel.
The death toll from the Philippines typhoon Yolanda, which was the biggest storm to ever come up on any land from the seas, at 198 miles an hour, killing now, the death toll has just reached 6,000. I want to thank Nick of New York, with another 2,000 missing. And that's where the ship was at, the United States USS Cowpens. It was down there in the Philippines helping these guys out. Why is China threatening our ships in international water when all they're doing is helping feed the poor, helping out the sick, going over there and rescuing the dying in the Philippines? China, why don't you do something for once?
Hey guys, Chrono 16 here. Today is date December 13th, 2013. Chinese warships, U.S. missile cruiser, nearly collide in South China Sea standoff. Now, a Chinese naval vessel tried to force a U.S. guided missile warship to stop in international waters recently, causing a tense military standoff in the latest case of Chinese maritime harassment, according to the defense officials. Now, the guided missile cruiser USS Cowpens, which recently took part in a disaster relief operation in the Philippines, was confronted by Chinese warships in the South China Sea near Beijing's new aircraft carrier, Liaoning, according to the official familiar with the incident. Now, on December 5th, while lawfully operating in international waters in the South China Sea, the USS Cowpens in a PLA Navy vessel had an encounter that required maneuvering to avoid a collision, a Navy official said. Now, the incident underscores the need to ensure the highest standards of professional seamanship, including communications between vessels, to mitigate the risk of an unintended incident or mishap. Now, a State Department official said the U.S. government issued protests to China in both Washington and Beijing in both diplomatic and military channels. Now, the Cowpens was conducting surveillance of the Liaoning at the time. The carrier had recently sailed from the port of Guangdong on the northern Chinese coast into the South China Sea. Now, guys, the situation over there in the China Sea is getting worse by the day. The Chinese Navy has recently been building up their forces, obviously, over the last few years, and now they think they can challenge the U.S. Navy. They've even bragged about it on their television, or on their local news outlets in China, how they can actually go toe-to-toe with the U.S. Navy. Now, I, for one, don't believe that they can, but guys, the situation is getting worse with China and Russia. I got attacked the other day by trolls who attacked me for uploading the story about Russia saying that they were going to nuke the United States, which they have been saying that for years. Okay? Remember, China and Russia are partners. They're friends. They team together. They do military exercises together. Okay? These guys are flexing their muscles across the world right now, because they're going to come and they're going to challenge the United States. There's been too many people having visions about the United States being invaded and attacked by Russia. Okay, don't take my word for it, guys. It's all right there in the Bible and also on these news stories. Now, this news story can be found under this video over at the nwreport.me website. Again, guys, a ship pulled out in front of one of our guided missile carriers and forced it to change its course, but the U.S. ship continued on its normal course through those waters down there as the Chinese tried to force them to stop, but they wouldn't.
China's naval vessel tried to force a U.S. warship to stop, even though it was in international waters. A Chinese naval vessel tried to force the U.S. guided missile warship to stop in international waters recently, causing a tense military standoff in the latest case of Chinese maritime harassment, according to defense officials. The guided missile cruiser, the USS Cowpens, which recently took part in the disaster relief in the operations in the Philippines, was confronted by a Chinese warship in the South China Sea near Beijing's new aircraft carrier. On the 5th of December, while lawfully operating in international waters in the South China Sea, the USS Cowpens and a PLA Navy vessel had an encounter that required maneuvering to avoid a collision. The incident underscores the need to ensure the highest standards of professional seamanship, including communications between vessels to mitigate the risk of unintended incident or mishap. A State Department official said the United States government issued a protest in China in both Washington and in Beijing in both the diplomatic and military channels. The USS Cowpens was conducting a surveillance while in international waters. The carrier had recently sailed from the port of the Philippines on its northern Chinese coast into the South China Sea. According to the officials, the run-in began after a Chinese Navy vessel sent a hailing warning and ordered the USS Cowpens to stop. The cruiser continued on its course. It refused the order because it was operating in international waters. Then a Chinese tank landed. A ship sailed in front of the USS Cowpens and stopped, forcing the USS Cowpens to abruptly change course in what the officials said was a dangerous maneuver. According to the officials, the Cowpens was conducting routine operations done to exercise its freedom of navigation near the Chinese carrier when the incident occurred about a week ago. So the Chinese government felt that the United States USS Cowpen was getting a little too close to their brand new aircraft carrier, even though they were in international waters.